Mr. Larson weighed in.
Yeah, we're good. We're ready.
Thank you. Whoa. It is now 7 p.m. and time to call the Tuesday, September 6th, Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission meeting to order. Will staff please call the roll?
Ms. Berkman?
Here.
Mr. Deck?
Here.
Mr. Horke?
Here.
Mr. Johns? Dr. Kelleher? Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Ms. Boljaric?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, are we prepared to have Dave Schmitz visible? Dave, we need to see your smiling face. Nope, that's not you. Okay. Very good. Need to make sure we do that. Item first on our docket tonight is approval of our amended, not quite 100% of them, but amended rules of procedure. If there are no questions or comments about those things that are in front of us tonight, is there a motion to approve the new amended rules of procedure? Any volunteers?
I'll make a motion to approve the amended rules of procedure as we've read.
Thank you. Motion by Andre Maui,
I'll second.
seconded by Matt Deck. Will staff please call the roll?
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item next is approval of the minutes of the August 15, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the August 15th, 2022 APC minutes.
Thank you. Motion from Matt Deck. Is there a second?
And second.
Seconded by Kristen Berkman. Staff, please call the roll.
Ms.
Yes.
Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Will staff please review the APC rules and procedures for tonight's meeting?
Okay, tonight on the agenda, we have items that do and do not require a public hearing. Our procedures for items requiring a public hearing are as follows. The department will summarize the petition, then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission. The president will open a public hearing. Individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. Those representing a group will be given 5 minutes to speak. Only one member of each group will be given 5 minutes to speak, and for efficiency purposes, we ask that those representing a group come up to speak first. The public hearing will be closed when all interested members of the audience have had a chance to be heard and all emails received during the meeting have been provided to Plan Commission members. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments, and the Plan Commission will follow with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. For our non-public hearing items, the department will summarize the petition and highlight any changes or modifications since the item was last before the commission. The department will also describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken. The petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present any changes, and the Plan Commission will then act upon the petition. For our general rules of conduct, we ask that you please not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time, and again, if you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. If you are attending in person and wish to speak in regard to an item scheduled for a public hearing, then please form a line along the west wall of the building when the hearing is open and sign in on the sign-in sheet as you approach the podium to speak. Again, we ask that those representing a group please speak first. During your comments, please state your name and address into the microphone for the record, and we ask that you please not repeat previously stated comments. Your presentation will be timed, and you will be advised when there is approximately 30 seconds remaining. If you are not attending in person and wish to comment on a public hearing petition, comments can be emailed to planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. Those comments will be forwarded to Plan Commission members and the petitioner. We would also like to remind everyone to please speak directly into the microphone so your comments can be put onto the record. Also, please mute your microphone when not speaking. And if you come up to the podium to speak, please ensure that the microphone is on as indicated by the green light on the base. Thank you.
Thank you. Item first is our consent agenda, which includes 2 items. If there was anybody here that wasn't overhearing the conversation prior to the opening of the meeting, I'll repeat just a little bit. We received a lot of correspondence regarding the item that's first on that agenda, the Guidepost Montessori Daycare. There is no opportunity to delay this. The developer has requested action. It is a fully compliant petition within the Maple Knoll PUD, and it's been through all of its legal requirements. So it is something that we need to keep on the consent agenda just as it is and approve both items of the consent agenda. So that being said, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the associated staff reports.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion from Matt Deck, a second from Andre Maui. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Sorry. Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljeric?
Yes.
Ms. Bergman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. President, can we, I thought I overheard someone from the community ask if they can have a contact for questions. Do you mind if we give them that email for Mr. Todd or the planners?
Some of the folks were up front that I was speaking with, they referred to Kevin and Pam. I'm not sure if they reached out specifically to do that, but our Community Development Director, Kevin Todd, and his Associate Director, Pam Howard, both can have all their contact information located from the website. So feel free to reach out to them if you would like to discuss this further, and they'll try to see what they can do to provide other information or maybe an avenue to the developer contact.
Yeah, and the staff planner for the project has their email listed directly on the agenda, as well as the general planner's email, which goes to everyone in our department.
Good point.
And I assume those other parcels around this particular project are also in the Maple Knoll PUD,
Correct.
correct? And those have not come forward for development yet, so perhaps they would like to just learn more about the process and understand that there's probably some things coming in addition to this daycare that have already been approved, just to help our citizens that have taken their time tonight to understand our process. Thank you.
Yep, good point. Moving on to items of business. First item is 2205-PUD-09 IBeach 31 at Grand Park PUD. Will staff go through the presentation from staff, please?
Good evening, APC members. For the record, Ryan Collingwood with the Community Development Department. The item presented before you tonight is the IBeach 31 at Grand Park PUD. This proposal is a change of zoning request for about 3 acres, which is located north of 181st Street and east of the future Grand Park Boulevard extension. Since the July 18th discussion meeting, the petitioners have provided exhibits highlighting the proposed exterior elevations of the building, as well as additional ordinance language. This item is before you this evening for a recommendation. It was introduced at the April 11th City Council meeting and received its public hearing at the May 4th APC meeting. The petition has received no public comments to date. Representing the petitioners tonight are Eric Douthit of Church, Hiddle, and Antrim, and Katie Connor, owner of IBeach. The petitioners intend to present updated details of the project tonight. They are available to answer any questions, as am I should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the commission, Eric Douthit, Churchill Antrim, 116 North Union here in Westfield. The main request that was made at the informational meeting was to provide two things. One, all four sides and what they were going to look like, as well as to go to a substantial compliance model instead of just a language model. So Pam, if you could turn to I can grab it here, thank you. Go back to the exterior elevations. I've got one. Where's the agenda for me here? Go back here. Thank you. A couple of the questions that we've received specifically on this were, if I can figure out how to get through my pages, there we go. On the west side specifically, there was a question on the architectural panels. You'll notice on the east side, we've got some blue mixed in. On the west, that's just a design choice. We can change the colors on that, and that wouldn't be an issue if that's an issue for folks. That was a design choice that was made by the architect. Secondly, with regards to the landscaping plan, I do want to emphasize one piece of that, and that is that the landscape plan is going to be slightly modified. There aren't nearly enough foundational planning shown here. This fence will be around each of these. That'll have foundational plantings around it, which will cause these trees that you see that are presently located probably to come along the west side and add some additional softening there on the west side. So those are two of the things that we wanted to point out specifically. There was another question that was asked with regards to parking. The owner is very satisfied that it's got enough parking based on her experience for what we need out there. She's satisfied that the customers are going to be satisfied, and so I think it otherwise complies. We're available for any additional questions you may have, but I think that addresses most of the questions and the changes that were made since the July informational meeting.
Thank you. Plan commissioners.
Am I guessing that we are not asking to, you're not asking for us to consider voting on this tonight because your concept plans that you're showing us are not what you plan to move forward with, right?
Our site plan and our concept plan both say that it's subject to final engineering. So the concept plan is not substantial compliance. It is only the materials that are shown in the elevation that are intended to be substantial compliance. And that's stated within the ordinance itself.
Okay. Personally, I know I have questions. Again, you're tying your landscaping plan to what we're seeing on your map is what you're actually going to do, correct?
No. We're
Okay.
tying it
And your
tying it to
language
the
kind of
language.
made it sound like that.
No, that is not the intention. The only thing that's going to be tied specifically to substantial compliance are going to be the elevations that you see here, because there were questions with regards to materials and what things were going to look like, so we've tied it specifically to that. We've not engineered the site to know exactly where the building's going to show up on the site yet. So once we know where that's going to be, then we'll be able to show you exactly where the trees are going to be in the landscaping. What we will be able to say is 30% of the actual trees themselves will be in the front and the 20-foot front setback, because that was one of the requests was made that if we have a significant amount of our trees on the front side so that it would present a nice view to folks that were on the street.
I don't see anything about your fencing detail either. Usually with something that would have fencing like this, we would see something included in the PUD about what fence you're going to use, where it's going to go, how it's going to look.
Sure, these fences will be the same fences that we presently have at our location. Black chain link fences, they'll be surrounded by not USVA required screening that goes around it since they're outdoor. So it'll be a black mesh screening that'll go around those fences. I don't think there's anything in the underlying PUD that says that we have to pick a specific kind of fence, but that's the kind of fence that we're going to have here, similar to
Well,
what we
but
have right
that's
now.
something we might want specifically as a protection again, you know, you're asking for something different here than what we would typically allow. And so, again, you know, unfortunately, Katie could decide to sell this tomorrow, or only bound to what's in our ordinance here. So what you say your plan is versus what could actually happen could be two different things.
Is there a specific kind of fence that you wouldn't want to see there?
I would not want a standard chain link fence. I think our UDO height restriction, can you guys refresh my memory on our height? Are you asking to have something other than what our UDO
No,
calls
because
for?
we have we have 8-foot chain link, black chain link fence presently around, and that's what we'd intend to put here, is 8-foot black chain link fence with the black windshield that goes around it.
You're also in an industrial park,
Yeah.
not on Grand Park Boulevard. I don't recall when we last approved a chain link fence of any height with or without slats. That's very disappointing. So,
Well, and that's what I'm wondering, because again, I can't understand visually how this is going to be integrated right now, because we don't have any fence detail included in our materials. And I don't have any assurance here. Again, I'm very worried about the Grand Park Boulevard side of this. There's basically a remnant piece that's left, and I don't know how that's going to be used. I do know that now the west side of this building is going to be incredibly visible to Grand Park Boulevard, or so it would seem. And right now, we have a very flat surface. At least what I'm seeing in your ordinance shows, again, nothing on that elevation. There's no corner offsets. There's no actual landscaping shown, again, on what I'm seeing here on your plan. You know, that makes me feel really uncomfortable, because that's what we're going to be presenting, that elevation. Potentially minus the trees, because again, there's nothing tying trees to that.
We'd have absolutely no problem committing to putting the trees on the west side. And one of the reasons that we added in the murals was to help soften that up and bring a unique side to that west side, to have those generic murals there.
That was something I was going to bring up, that I appreciate the murals are still there, because I know I mentioned that last time of just having some sort of, you know, if it's not trees, artwork to distinguish itself, saying, hey, welcome to Grand Park, you're in the sports campus, so on and so forth. So I appreciate those at least.
Kristen?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little more about this west side also. So on the front, you do have those blue tiles that appear, I believe you've used those on kind of the south and the east, coming around that corner. And it seems like that's a detail that should be on the northwest as well. You've used these graphic panels, which are very interesting, so that's fine. But I'm concerned about this west side as well because of this skinny parcel of land. I'm not sure what can actually go there. And Kevin, can you comment on that? Is that parcel big enough for another business to go on it?
Which one?
The one to the west of this building, that's kind of that narrow slice of land between the building and Grand Park Boulevard.
Yeah, I have not run the analysis on that. It doesn't appear that there would be a lot of room to put anything there.
Okay. So I guess we need to plan, I mean, as we talk about it this evening, that will be a prominent building facade going down Grand Park Boulevard. And I'm also confused on the landscape plan, honestly, because you show the compliance of the building and you show those trees all the way around, yet those aren't on the concept landscaping plan. So I guess I'm pretty confused on what's actually going on with the landscaping here. And there's parts of the PUD that talk about foundation plantings, that you're doing shrubs, I think, and grasses, but it doesn't mention trees, and you're opting out of some of the UDO requirements, which would require trees. So I just feel like I'm just confused on what's happening with the landscaping on this plan. And I should have started with this, I wanted to start with this, that I love this business. I think that it's a great fit for Grand Park. It's been very popular in our city. So what I'm saying, I don't want to be discouraging of this idea or this business. I just feel like we haven't quite dotted all the i's, crossed all the t's for understanding what we're actually getting. And this fencing issue that Mrs. Spoljaric brought up and Mr. Horke, I didn't really even see that in the ordinance. Maybe I missed it, but it's just another detail that I don't think's there. So I have those concerns. I also would just like you to explain to us, I believe that in your ordinance, you're asking for 5 less trees than our UDO asks for per acre. And we really seem to be at a time in our community where we are losing trees on certain parcels as development happens, and then not to take that opportunity to actually plant trees when we should on new development. So I'm concerned that we've lowered the standard on that particular part of our UDO. And the other thing that I just had a question on was the uses section. The way I'm interpreting it, and I would be happy to have staff also jump in on this, is that this could be a restaurant, retail business. The way the language reads for me is this wouldn't have to be a volleyball facility without coming back to the APC or council. It lists quite a few uses, and it doesn't say anything about being in support of the volleyball. And I'm just wondering how staff interprets that. And then there's also a line in about the director can make some decisions on the uses. And I'm just not sure how all that plays out in the future in an ordinance. So those are my questions.
You want me to go first? You want to go first? Go ahead. Sir, with regards to the language with regards to the permitted uses, the primary permitted use is the indoor multi-athletic facility. I think we had in there, and I'm looking for it, and supporting uses would be the restaurant, bar, and things like that. I'd have to look for the language again. But the intention is that there's got to be an athletic use as the primary use that's there. And that was the language that was contemplated 2 meetings ago, and I think that we walked through that with staff to confirm that was in fact the case. With regards to the foundational plantings, there are a significant number of trees given the size of where we are. There will have to be foundational plantings with 4 shrubs per every linear 12 feet here. And the reason that we backed off the trees was because the trees will not be here on the east side because of the nature of the volleyball courts themselves. We don't want to have trees next to the volleyball courts. We don't have enough spaces, quite frankly, to put the rest of the trees on the east and meet that number. We've got a significant number of trees here on the south side, and again, we can commit to, as you see in the elevations, the trees that we've got on the west side and the trees that we've got on the north side to help soften that particular view. So we can make that commitment. With regards to the blue versus gray panels, we can change the colors on those panels on the southwest corners if that's something you'd really like to see. That's not going to be an issue at all. On the fence piece, the fences, these are consistent with the fences that we need to use for a volleyball facility. We've got some limitation with regards to the kind of fences we can have and be qualified for a national volleyball facility. So these are the kinds of fences that are used. This is the kind of shielding, wind shielding that we've got around those. So we do have a bit of a limitation given the use, given the kind of fences we can have. We have to have 8-foot chain link fence with these kinds of wind shields around it in order to get that nature. So there are no fences, and there aren't fences listed in the ordinance.
Yeah, the UDO covers that, and actually up to 10-foot chain link fence is allowed per the UDO for business and industrial and institutional uses. So necessarily. I mean, if it's, let me put it this way, if it's not specifically in the PUD ordinance, the UDO would govern the height. The UDO does not govern location. So if that's something that's important to, I guess, ensure in this ordinance, then that's, I don't know if you're willing to commit to
Yeah.
a location.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, that's not a problem at all. There are going to be fences and foundational plantings around each of the volleyball courts. And that's an extension of the building. So since it's an extension of the building, well, actually, fences are specifically called out for foundational plantings. So it'd be foundational plantings all the way around that entire location in order to comply with the UDO at that same four bushes and grass per 12 linear feet.
Fences over 80 feet or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which this will comply with that.
Regarding uses, just to circle back on that question. I lost my spot, sorry. I think I agree, Kristen, that 5.3 restaurant, bar, office, health, fitness, and exercise center in the ordinance does not, there's nothing in there that indicates that it's ancillary to. So if that's something that's also important, then maybe we can clarify that as well.
That's the intention.
But in 5.1, the comment about director determination, that's probably true anyway, frankly. Anything that comes through that may not specifically be listed in an ordinance as a use, we are constantly reviewing those, analyzing those, trying to determine where or if those uses fit into our permitted use table. So I don't even think that sentence is necessary because it's probably true anyway. But it's just part of the routine of what we do on any given proposal.
And that's a commitment we'd be happy to make if it helps clarify the language for you under 5.3.
5.3.
Yep.
But 5.2, that is like part of the main part of the use. So I don't know that that would be, can we flip over to the ordinance?
I guess on this, what I'm wondering about is if this was a business change down the road, does this language protect us that someone would need to come back and ask for approval for a different type of business in that location? Does that make sense?
I think anything other than an indoor facility that includes, but not limited to, those items that are listed in that list, you know, beach sports, offices, retail sales, athletic and recreational uses,
I think
and the outdoor component. And then if we can clarify 5.3 that will be an ancillary component of, I guess, 5.1.
Yeah.
Probably makes sense.
that's not a problem at all.
Then yes, I think someone would have to come back.
Okay. It's just the front door of Grand Park, and certain businesses might work there and some may not. So I just,
We're happy to clarify that language. That's our intention. And we agree that that's an important component to keep in.
Dave Schmitz, let me invite you to join the conversation right now if you have any thoughts or comments.
Thanks. Since we're really focusing on uses at the zoning stage, I think what you were just speaking of is, I would agree that for 5.3 to refer to those in support of the volleyball use or the uses in 5.1 or subordinate to or accessory to or whatever the language is, would take care of that concern. I think with the, and I also agree with Chris, and for what it's worth, with the design issue, the color issue, that west elevation is just crucial And I think that adding that color element with the other stuff, which I like, would really help that west facade. And the other stuff, I understand the situation with the uncertainty with the landscape plan, and I think that's something that can be deferred to down the road. At least I'm comfortable with that. So I think that's all I have, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Other commissioner comments?
I got a couple, probably kind of a mixture here. Excuse me. First, a comment to the petitioner. I suspect that this process maybe has brought you before us a little more than you expected, and I appreciate your patience, and I hope you see, I sincerely believe that the interaction and the development of the design that has occurred as a result of this process, excuse me, has really made it better, and I think it's to the benefit of the facility. I look forward to seeing it eventually approved, built, and open. That'll be good. As far as the critical nature of being the front door at Grand Park and that west side and the northwest corner, I agree with the concerns, but I also get concerned because we get into this dance a lot. We are a planning commission, and about the use of the land, which we all think this is a great use. Excuse me. And we do need to establish that character and quality, which we've had so many conversations about, without designing your building for you. And we get into those conversations a lot. We start talking about, different colors and things. And I guess at the root is, we want to make sure that there's architectural character on that side, basically commensurate with as if it's the front of the building. And I think, just as a reminder to us, and I don't have the answer to this, we got to figure out how to propose the language for that without this panel here or that panel there. I mean, the design's coming along. It's got a little bit to do yet on that corner. And that's kind of where I am, is we want that to look as good as a front, even though it's technically the back. So I guess we probably should make that statement and then flip it back over to you to say, then here's how we'll make it look as good as a front when it's on the back.
It's certainly an interesting issue. It's not a spite strip to the west, right? Because that's not where it came from. It's just the nature of how that's developed. To have imposed upon this particular site design standards that, if there were a spot to the west, wouldn't necessarily exist, makes life a little bit difficult, right? It can make things a little bit more expensive than we'd like it to be. There are the architectural panels there in the northwest. If you have, so here's so you'll see that the panels exist right here. And if you think of Grand Park Boulevard, people are going to see it at the corners. They're not going to be, not that it's not going to be available on the west, but when they're driving by, that flat west view isn't going to be the most commonly seen westerly view. It's going to be this particular corner when they're coming through that semi-roundabout. And that was the emphasis of where we were. And I think by agreeing to put some additional trees here to offset and soften the side, hopefully we can get there. Again, the color was a design choice made by the architect. It wasn't that it cost a penny more or a penny less to pick those particular colors, right? So that is just a straight design choice by the architect to offset how the other colors are coming here. I'm not an architect. I don't know why that choice was made, but that's why that choice was made. We can go through and number panels, pick colors, but is that really what we want to try to get done today? If we wanted to put some more trees to the west, we could certainly do that. I think these look really cool. I really like those, and I thought that was a nice touch in order to get done what we've got done. So I don't know what the answer to the question is, how to make it better if we go back. I just don't know how to answer that specific question on what to do on this southwest corner here, and to keep it within the budget of what we're trying to get accomplished and the use of what we're trying to get accomplished. So that's the dilemma that we face, and I'm not sure what additional ideas we have to address that specific concern beyond committing to additional landscaping here And again, if we wanted to color some of these, we could in a way that looked good.
I'm very disappointed in the west elevation. We talked at length about four-sided architecture, which is part of what we're responsible to make sure happens. Changing the color of a metal panel, to me, doesn't constitute adding any architectural value. I'm not sure where the composite panels were referred to. I didn't open that exhibit again tonight, but I'm familiar with that type of product, and it's a fine product. But to have barely 10% of that elevation with a better quality material, I'm not sure how the life expectancy of the murals will be. If they're big enough, probably mounting those on vertical metal siding could be okay. But there's just too much wall that has no real interest to it, and I'm not sold that it's going to be well hidden by trees 12 months out of the year for multiple years in a row. I bug staff every now and then about things I observe as I'm driving around the community, and I don't know where they stand on some of these, but I look at dying and dead trees, and when they get to be in excess, I flag it for them. There's only so many hours in the day, and they're not out looking for violations, but when they're brought to their attention, we want them to look at it. I don't want to have to drive by this building in a few years and ask them, why are there only 3 trees, but there should have been 6, because the others didn't survive, and how are we going to get them replaced? And then it becomes an enforcement action. I really think we need better architecture. I was a little disappointed in the metal panels on this side of the building being as prevalent as they are, but they're multiple colors, they change directions, they've got other things happening. They may not be as much of a visual issue. And I don't really agree with your assessment that only the corner is really going to be visible. I think a lot of that building, west side, will be visible north and southbound. So I find not doing a better job of treating it to be kind of disappointing. It warrants better. If it wasn't on Grand Park Boulevard, I may have a slightly different take on that. But this is what's becoming the new main entry thoroughfare up to Grand Park. It's going right through the middle of the campus. It goes all the way down to Route 32. So it's going to carry a lot of our visitor traffic.
Eric, could you go back to, you had, I think it's sheet A2 you had before that had the east and west elevations, one above the other. To me, that's the perfect illustration right there. When we're talking about commensurate, maybe not same architecture on east and west, here I go again. You can see, I mean, so you got glass on the east. You don't have any on the west. You could, potentially, if it works. You have an entrance awning. Well, there's no entrance on the west. That doesn't make sense. I get it, right? So just comparing those two, you go, wow, the front's got interest pretty much the entire length of it. There's not a big space that's devoid of some sort of a feature or character, but you do have that on the west.
Right.
I mean, that's, and again, I don't want to sit there and say, well, could you please put them more murals or glassware? We don't want to design your building, but this to me illustrates the point right there.
And if on this same slide, there are 2 sheets to it, Andre was referring to sheet A2, which is the next one down, and it shows the layout of the interior, there'd be at least 5 opportunities to see the activity going on inside the building if there was a big window wall in multiple places. It'll be lit up at night. Presumably it'll be colorful.
Okay.
It could draw a lot of interest that would largely perhaps solve the finished material problem.
So is there language that could resolve this without necessitating a design where we go with a substantial compliance with the elevations? Or is this, I guess this is kind of conversational now, I'm just kind of ourselves, or are we saying, come back to us again? What are we thinking?
Kind of like you've commented, I don't want to go too deep into the design end of things here, and I try to avoid that all the time when I start making comments. I think I've got some really capital ideas, but I need for the petitioner to bring the ideas that they find satisfactory and reflect the best of our intentions in communicating our thoughts to them. And so actually I would like to see this more thoroughly studied for opportunities for better materials, better landscaping, and visibility inside the building.
Okay. Right, so, and I, because we have, these are garage doors right here, aren't they? One of the things that we said specifically in our original plan was we weren't going to be limited with regards to the number of garage doors. I think we could probably commit, and because do you know what this material is? Right there, is that the same material, just going a different direction? We could commit and submit something very similar to this to allow to view a viewing window into those courts without any problem. If this is something that you like here, that's not a problem at all.
And see, I like the glass because exactly what you just said, not only what it does for the building facade, but to see what's in the building, that's even more important.
I want to be thoughtful with regards to play because of the nature of it. We don't want glares coming in
Yep.
when folks are, so that's ultimately, that's the primary goal here, is to create a great volleyball facility that are going to bring people to play both beach and indoor volleyball to Westfield and consistent with the campus. So I'd want to be thoughtful about that specific design. I know that we have folks that are very impatient behind me that aren't going to want to hear us bumping this out, including the representative of the seller and our clients. But what I'm hearing you say is we need to come back with this specific design if we're going to get to substantial compliance.
There's nothing they can do tonight. There's no language they can, how many times have you been up here? Is this your fourth,
As many as
fifth?
time.
There's got to be a more efficient way to do this.
It has been an unfortunately high number of
And
times.
at what point are petitioners going to get so frustrated they just don't want to bring things in front of the APC or the city council? I mean, this is,
Right, and I don't want that to be the end result here, but I believe we've made what I would believe are fairly clear comments about what our expectations are, and yet what we get back is not reflective of what I believe is the detail we've provided previously, which makes me kind of have a difficulty thinking, all right, what can we craft as far as some language to say you're out of here based on this, this, and this happening? I don't know how we could wrap this up in that kind of an approval, but I'm not the only one up here, so others that have opinions on this, please weigh in. I know Kristen had similar comments. You talked about some of these sorts of things too. If I'm the only one that's having this concern, that's one thing, but I believe we're, as a body, needing more of the feedback that we've been trying to get.
In speaking with staff, I think we could come up with a substantial compliance. And make sure I've heard this correct. Why don't you guys do it since you're going to be the ones enforcing it instead of me
Yeah,
making it up?
so if the item that, just talking about architecture, you want that element added to the next exhibit, the west facade. So if you drafted a condition, that's a motion with the condition that that element from the east facade with the garage doors will be added to the west facade prior to ordinance adoption, then they would have between now and whenever they appear at council to add that in. And if council is satisfied that they met that condition, the ordinance would then be eligible for adoption.
At the risk of going down too much of a, let me help you design your building path, in looking at the two overhead doors on the east elevation and then scanning down to the floor plan, are these doors that are likely to be opened or never likely to be opened?
On the east side, they will be opened.
Okay, so I'm not sure that I see that size opening, 12 by 12, is going to provide the kind of visibility that I would envision being the right amount of visibility for the west side of the building because of the size of the courts. On the east elevation, you've got palms, you've got the sign with overhead lights, you've got two different materials, albeit metal siding, but it's going horizontal, or it's only going vertical. The wood series wall panels are going horizontally. They fit in that kind of an elevation very nicely, but to put similar sized openings on the west side, I think is too small of an opening. Garage doors come in a lot of different sizes. You could probably get them 12 by 16. That might be a better size, and put two of them side by side. If you're never going to open them, then the fact that they have something between them that would have potential traffic running into them, but you don't have anything out that side of the building to go to, so I don't know why you would consider opening them. They could be fixed windows, similar in look so that they match the rest of the building, but I think they need to be wider and taller.
Yeah, and I think the intention would be to have the alternate, so I guess this is horizontal instead of vertical. So I do think the intention would be to bring this look to this side. Could we do 3 on that side, or would that get? Yeah, would it? But I'm thinking from a view of the player standpoint. Would you get too much sun in the eyes over there?
I think the problem here is that we just have to be realistic, because again, this is a sports facility, and again, you guys have been back here 4 or 5 times now, whatever it is, and we're beating this to death, whereas you had a workshop session here where all of this should have been brought up then. Do I agree? Hey, yeah, let's improve the west side as much as possible. Yes, but again, with this being a volleyball facility, this is a unique situation comparatively. If it was another sport, another facility, whatever it is, hearing the discussion back there, how many ever windows we have back there, it may impact play. Who's to say? And we definitely don't want to have a facility that has a negative impact on the players that are going to be there. That's the bottom line. I know we want things to look as nice as possible. I definitely do, and I mentioned, hey, with this being the grand entrance into Grand Park Boulevard, I appreciate the murals. I appreciate the additional trees. Again, we are stretching this thin as much as possible, and we cannot be unrealistic, have unrealistic asks for the petitioners that come up here. We have to be fair to them, and to ask them to, in my personal opinion, we gotta get this done tonight, because it is not fair to ask them to come back again and again and again, rack up all the extra costs, whether it be building materials or it having Eric up here. I mean, it costs not just money, it costs time, it costs our time. So I just really hope we can get this done tonight, to be fair to not just IBeach, but anyone else that might come up here. And so that way they don't see, oh, I go to APC, I'm gonna be treated like this, I gotta come up here 6 times. That's just not fair. That's not how I think Westfield should work. That's my piece.
So Matt and Victor have been far more direct than I guess I was, beating around the bush a little bit, kind of heading to that same thing. Is there anything we can do tonight to get the language to where this is acceptable? Maybe we could give the petitioner a couple minutes to come up with the language to us, because we're trying to solve it, and we've expressed our concern, but I think we should be very clear if this is the only concern. Like fencing kind of fell out of the discussion. I don't know if that still exists or if we're really just focused on this.
I think we've got a whole list here.
So,
The landscaping is also an
so
issue.
landscaping, fencing, and elevation.
And
So,
elevation.
But again, with fencing, we have to be fair, because I agree that with it being chain link fencing, because you don't want to create a wind tunnel, a wind vacuum inside the sand court, because then you're creating what other possibilities of, sand tunnels, or again, the wind, it impacts play. And we want a premier facility for people who want to come here.
The fencing, we cannot change the fencing.
and since the fencing right now, it's following the UDO anyway. Maybe all we need is just say, there's no fencing on the west side where you don't have any purpose for it anyway, and that goes away, and it stays where the function is necessary. And I don't know if that's the only concern, though. I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me, for the places that you need fencing, I'm not concerned with what's there or what you're needing there.
I have one more thing.
Yeah.
And you would probably have to face this later, but that's why I'm just asking it now so there's not something added later. Where's your trash enclosure?
I'll have to look. Let me get my concept plan up. We'd be following the UDO when it came to the trash enclosure and our requirements to keep it screened.
I just don't want to see you wind up in a situation where we're coming back and having to,
Having to do the trash enclosure.
Rectify.
That's a very good point. I don't see where we've got the trash enclosure on here, Cindy. That's a good point.
you can't stick it just anywhere if you're going to have a
Right.
truck in there to pick it up.
You know those moments where your peers bring up something and you go, well, why didn't I think of that? Thanks, Cindy.
Yes, that's a good one to bring up.
I don't want them to have to come back again.
Nor do I. Is that all you have,
So
Cindy?
the landscaping plan, what we can do is we can draw up the exact landscaping plan that is mirrored within the language. That's not a problem to adhere to that, because we are, again, bound by the language, not bound by the drawing when it comes to landscaping.
Well, that's what I'm having trouble getting in my mind, because you're asking for quite a bit less. I mean, most of the standards are less in terms of landscaping across the board. And so I don't know how that's going to look. Do you know what I mean? You're requesting actually a lot of changes in there.
And a lot of that's because of the space we're using for outdoor volleyball facilities. I mean, we're planting a lot of trees in the green space we've got because of what we're using for the outdoor volleyball facilities. So, but I'm appreciative of your point of view and appreciative of needing to get that fixed. Well, at this point, what do you guys want to do?
Is there any way like they can do any type of, like even help plant trees on that 50-foot that's beside us that
Right.
we can't even do anything on? So
Yeah.
we can add trees and add stuff there that's gonna even hide that west side even more. But that's not, I mean, we're gonna have to get approval from the owners of that, to put trees on there, but they're not gonna be able to build really anything in that space anyway.
Well, yeah, so we can't commit to build on that. We can only commit to build within our 10-foot setback.
That's a little larger area than 50 feet. While the
Yeah.
discussion was going on, I looked at the GIS map. It's actually like 130 feet from right away to property line.
Okay,
So
good.
that's quite a bit of space
That
to
is
try
quite a
to
bit of space.
fill if somebody would allow you to do it. That's
Yeah,
just
and
not gonna,
I think we're at a 10-foot buffer to our west, give or take. Is that right? Yeah, I
For
think
the
we're at a
staff.
10-foot buffer. So the number of trees we can put in that is relatively limited. But there's no problem committing to putting those trees to the west that we had in the northeast portion. And I'd really like to get it done tonight. I know everybody would. But to answer the specific question on the architectural piece in a way that makes folks satisfied, and the trash enclosure piece, which I think is a good one, I do think we'll have to bump, quite frankly. Bob, don't come in.
I just want to say again, this is something that I really want to see in this area, in this, in our city. So I certainly don't want you to feel discouraged at all, but the ordinance is the law. And so what we look at here and what we end up seeing, we just need to have a level of confidence. And right now, there's just some things that are a little different between the concept plan and what's in writing and saying you'll be in substantial compliance. If we can just kind of get it all aligned,
But-
that would be fantastic.
That's fine, but I do want to emphasize the concept. We're not going to be in substantial compliance with the concept plan because we haven't engineered it. The only thing we're substantial compliance with are the architectural renderings, which is something we requested at the last meeting.
So right now, I think your language actually shall be developed in substantial compliance with the concept plan.
Except, we went over this with staff and specifically called out the final layout shall be subject to terms of this ordinance and may vary from the depiction shown in the concept plan in 3.1. So we were comfortable, we had this in a staff meeting before we got here to specifically say that the concept plan was not going to, until the site was engineered, wasn't going to apply with regards to landscaping, wasn't going to require, apply to layout. And staff was satisfied with that language.
before we bring this to conclusion, I want to invite Dave Schmitz. If there's anything that you've heard in the ongoing dialogue since you were a last part of it, do you want to weigh in with anything new, or are you good still?
I'm good. Thank you, Bob.
Okey-doke.
All right.
So who is our language master, and how many things do we have to attach that language to try to make this as clear and concise as possible if we're going to come up with a recommendation tonight?
So we've got three specific things I think that we've committed to. The first is with regards to the use and making sure that's ancillary. Did I pronounce that right? I think I actually did. With regards to the restaurant and the bar, we're willing to make that commitment. We're willing to make the commitment with regards to the planting of the trees to the west as seen within the elevation.
Exterior rendering exhibit, I believe, is the one that shows that. Yeah, so I would say if it's the three items being the use, the landscaping, and the architecture, that the conditions would be in section 5.3, specify that these uses need to be ancillary to the sport facility.
Yep.
In section 7.1, I guess that would be more in the character exhibit, add the element from the east facade that contains the material direction change and garage doors into that exhibit prior to council consideration. And then under landscaping standards, I would go under 7.2D, that additionally the trees shown in the elevation renderings exhibit shall be provided along the building facades.
I'm just really uncomfortable with that. I just want to go on record. I think that's way too many changes, and we have no idea what this building is going to look like. So I just want to ask the petitioner, I mean, is this a problem to kind of work on this and come back in 2 weeks?
So when you say you don't know what the building's going to look like, help me to understand what that means.
I don't know what this is going to look like. I mean, you need to go back to your architects. We've thrown out all these different ideas, bringing the blue around, throwing garage doors on it, doing windows. There's been this laundry list of brainstorming, which is great, but I feel like you all deserve an opportunity to go back and actually come back to us and say, this is what this building is going to look like when you're saying you're going to be substantially compliant to what it looks like.
Well, not to add more difficulty, but like I'm looking at the elevations that are included in here, and like along that facade, it looks like there's 10 trees. In here, it looks like 4. And again, I just don't, I need to know what I'm approving, I guess. So.
Yes, I do too.
So on the west side, there are 4 trees, and that's what we would commit to on the west side.
But what, so I'm confused, because like right now I'm looking at the hand-drawn kind of, I shouldn't say hand-drawn, it's all computer done these days. The elevations, and you're showing the exterior elevations.
I am.
That one that you were just on, the third one, the first page of it.
That's, I mean, that's just showing something different than what you show in the other photo for elevations.
Correct. Which one would you like us to commit to?
Well, I
Because I
prefer
think
the
the
one here
intent-
because it's got the evergreens, but I'm not sure, again, because I don't know what these pieces are. I don't know if those are shrubs. I don't know what's grass is like, or evergreen trees versus ornamental. I just don't know. I mean, they're a green blob on here, so. You're showing looks like a shade or ornamental tree on the one. But
Correct.
for us to have any year-round coverage, these would need to be evergreen. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything to block. But again, if we're making, not we, if the petitioner is making changes on what we're gonna be seeing on that elevation, there might not need to be as much to screen year-round, or at least not as important to have that screened with evergreens.
Well, and Bob mentioned the winter interest too, depending on what the architecture looks like. You know, the evergreens might be needed for winter interest, but if there's some other architecture elements, maybe not. That's why I'm just really unclear on what this west side will end up looking like. I just don't feel comfortable voting, saying, make it better. That's me.
The path we're traveling down here, correct me if I'm wrong, it was to try to come up with a broad but concise description of what we're looking for. So this could get a qualified recommendation to send to council next week. Prior to getting to council, though, there would be updated whatever kind of exhibits are necessary and revisions to the ordinance for review.
Yes, so in
Kind of-
order, yeah, it would have to comply with the language that we've proposed in order for council to consider it for a positive, for a recommendation.
I think where I'm going next is for staff. How would you look at all of those things in advance of the council meeting to determine they've nailed it, this is the kind of thing that the APC wanted? Or are you going to be in a position of lose-lose and basically send something along, council, you can take a look at this? We're not sure if this really is going to totally encapsulate the APC's broad concerns to do what's needed to this building, and you guys just make it up?
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's our preference not to send something with multiple conditions unless they're very specific. If it's add this language to this, if it's, you said the dumpster enclosure was gonna be here, show it on, add it to the concept plan at that location, those are things that we can determine if they comply or not. If not, we're stuck in a place where we're relying on really the council representatives on the plan commission, and tonight we only have one here. So I feel like that's a lot falling on one person to determine whether or not they think you satisfied that condition, or as you said, they're going into council not knowing. And if they've gone to council and they don't feel it's satisfied, then they're going back to council. It does make it difficult for us. So unless it's a tangible, hard standard that you can say, we want you to add this, we prefer it not to be sent with conditions.
Which is the exact answer I was expecting from you, and I was not wanting to paint you into a corner, but it sounds like there's some folks here that want to paint you into a corner. I'm not necessarily among them, but I do understand we've rehashed this. I don't have a magic solution.
Well,
I think the right planning direction is work as hard as you can to get what we're really after here. Don't take the low budget end necessarily. If things are gonna cost a few dollars more, don't make it 12 feet tall in the door because that one's $2,000 less than the 16-foot door. If the 16-foot door is gonna make a better impact on the building, then put the 16 there. Some of this has been alluded to during the discussion that you have a budget. We're not insensitive to that, but we have ordinances and expectations and things that we owe the community to try to do our job well.
I appreciate that. All right, well,
All right, are you,
I think we'll see you in a couple.
all right, before you leave, I want to make sure we're leaving with a clear list of things that we're changing between now and next time. So we have the three things that Pam just read off, right? The 5.3 restaurant use being ancillary to the sport facility, adding the material change or copying essentially the material change. This is not how this will be worded.
I understand.
But on the east, from the east side of the building to the west side of the building.
Yep.
Issue 2. Issue 3, the facade plantings on the west and north side of the building. We've also talked about fence location. We've also talked about trash enclosure location. Are there other things? Because this very likely will be the last time, the next time. I'm guessing, right?
Yes,
So-
will be.
Yes, needs to be.
And we echo that sentiment totally. We would really like to nail it and have zero discussion for the most part and send you off to council with a, whatever number of us are here, unanimous recommendation to grab this and run with it. And why don't you come forward and speak your name? We're gonna,
So, yeah, I mean, again, whether we've made these recommendations and they haven't been followed, I don't want to get into that. It's just the number of times that they've been up here. They've got a project, we can argue about the percentage that it is to our satisfaction, 85, 90, whatever. It's going to be an essential part of Grand Park, and I agree, having that architecture on the west wall would be a great first impression, but it's not going to have an impact on any of the visitors coming to Grand Park. The fact that she could choose to up and go somewhere else due to being as frustrated as she is in all of this, it's something that we have to consider as we leave here tonight. Because we're going to have them come back, they're going to try to get that extra 10% done, and I'm sure we'll vote it through at that time, but is that going to be in 2 weeks, 4 weeks? And at what point does she give up and go somewhere else? Because we don't have that last 10% just right, or that last 15% just right. We are where we are. Guess we'll see you next time if you come back.
I guess we've worked through this process, and just so you know, we are changing our process as a plan commission to where we're going to have workshop meetings, which I think could have really helped this process. But that I mean, for you, for future clients, I think will be a big help. But in all fairness, the first plan we saw, we talked about the roof. We didn't see this building. I remember asking, what does the building look like? And it was like, this, don't look at the building tonight, just look at the roof. And then the next time it was about the roof. So I think we've only had one other meeting where we were actually looking at this building. And I pulled that back up today, and the west side, I don't believe, was in those renderings. So I think this is the first conversation we've had on the west side, on this Grand Park Boulevard side and entrance into Grand Park. So I just wanted to kind of take us back through this process together, that we didn't have this building on the first time you all came to present. So it has been a process, and we appreciate your patience. And I guess, Kevin, the only thing that I don't think I heard you say was, on the landscaping, there's just a difference between what's written in the ordinance, what's on the concept plan, and what's in these renderings that say they need to be substantially compliant as far as the building, which maybe the foundation plannings don't go with those pictures, but they're all different. And so if we can align all three of those, if you can add that to the list, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we can scrub back through the ordinance and make sure everything ticks and ties.
And then from a procedural perspective, we've just adopted our new rules of procedure to accommodate this new process. So our next meeting will not be at this location. It will be at City Services. It is scheduled to be a workshop meeting, which does not allow for items to be voted upon. Now, granted, that is in the rules of procedure, and that rule could be suspended if they were to choose to come in 2 weeks and you're inclined to suspend the rule and allow a vote at the workshop meeting. That was not the intent of our process, but this is really a transition item that's, transitioning between the two processes. So I think as a department, we'd be okay with that. But that is just something for your consideration. In 2 weeks, we will not be here. We will be at City Services. In 4 weeks, we'll be back here.
and I certainly don't want to wait till 4 weeks. I was thinking about that myself. What can you project, if anything, right now about who we may have on our September 19th agenda?
I believe the Westfield Yard PUD that you saw last month at Moontown would be on the 19th for their workshop meeting. That's our first workshop eligible item. So assuming they submit everything and are ready to go, they would be on that agenda. And that would be the only item, except maybe some additional discussions.
Yeah, that would be the item of business from your normal agenda. And then we also will want to start talking about the questions that the mayor presented before this group earlier this year. So that's on my list of things for us to start talking about in 2 weeks.
This exact scenario is unlikely to repeat. So suspending that rule and to allow it to occur on the 19th, I think is reasonable. I look forward to minimal discussion and an approval that night if you are able to come back. The only reason you wouldn't be able to be heard, and I'm speaking on behalf of some of my fellow commissioners here, is something on your end. But we'll be happy to have you. We'll suspend that rule for this petition and we'll try to get you out the door, and we'll all come in expecting to see compliance with what we've discussed to a reasonable level and get it done.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Before we end, I just want to say directly to the petitioners that I am so sorry that you have to go through this like this. And I congratulate you for, if it is a congratulations, to have this level of patience, because I would not. I mean, I am biting my tongue a lot here, but when you said that, oh, we'll just go somewhere else, I mean, it hit me in my heart, because I just don't know how petitioners are dealing with this. I mean, 4, 5, 6 meetings, and for you to have to pay every single time for you to be here, that's something that's not being considered up here. You know, the amount of strain that's being put on you, it's uncalled for. And I am just so sorry, and I just want to say thank you for having the patience and sticking out with Westfield. I appreciate you very much.
Just to put this out here too, for what it's worth, and Cindy, you may correct me here, I don't think there will be a second city council meeting in September. At least I'm not showing that on my calendar.
I keep hearing that there won't be, but I have some concerns that we might need to have some business.
Okay.
From state law kind of perspective, but I could be wrong. But
Okay.
yeah, right now, I think they're planning on
So-
not having one.
Reality is, this earliest this would be back in front of, be eligible for council potentially would be October, was that 10th? So, and again, for information purposes.
All right. Thank you, and we'll look forward to completing this on the 19th, and then council does what council does. Next item of business in front of us tonight is the Unified Development Ordinance Amendment for flood, no wait, that's getting ahead of myself. For the landscape bonds, 2208-ZOA-02. Staff report, please.
Thank you, President, members of the commission. So if you recall, this was an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance. It was brought to you on August 1st for a public hearing. This essentially is revising the landscaping maintenance requirements in the UDO. As a quick refresher, there's kind of 2 thresholds that are triggered in order to perform landscaping inspection. Through that process, it's become pretty belabored, and it's creating a lot of issues on staff, public, and petitioner builder. So from that meeting on August 1st, it was recommended that we go back through and create whatever language needs to be created in order to make sure that we can fall back on these requirements of requiring a performance bond for landscaping. So we have revised the language in our processes and permits chapter of the UDO. We created an entirely new section called landscaping bonds, where all of that language that would require everything on an application, all of the supplemental documents, procedure and policy for what happens if they don't provide it, the timing duration, the % of the bond that's required, all of that's included now in this ordinance. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions about landscape bonds that haven't been answered already? Dave Schmitz?
No questions. I appreciate the refinements and liked it the first time through conceptually, so no questions for me, thanks.
Very good. Since there's no questions, we can move on to, yes.
Yeah, we were requesting a vote on that ordinance tonight.
Go ahead and make the motion to forward a positive recommendation to council.
Thank you. Motion from Victor McCarty, and do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Matt Peck. Staff, please call the roll.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljerick?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Perfect. We now have strange little things popping into my screen. Two public hearing items, Austrian Pine PUD Amendment 1, 2209-PUD-18. This also has an option in the event that we may not have a public comment, since there's no public here, that we could also act on this tonight.
Good evening, Planning Commission. For the record, Dane Crabtree with the Community Development Department. The item for you this evening is a proposed amendment specific to Lot 3 of the Austrian Pine PUD, which is located on the south side of State Road 32 between Austrian Pine Way and Dartown Road. This proposal seeks to modify the requirement that a minimum of 2 buildings exceed the maximum setback of the State Highway 32 Overlay District. Instead, the proposal would modify the language so buildings may exceed the maximum setback, as Phase 2 of Ortho Indy, a 16,000 square foot expansion, is proposed to be located closer to the State Highway 32 right-of-way than the existing building. Additional language, the same used in the adjacent Springwell Point PUD, which permits landscaping to be modified when planting congestion or conflict with existing utilities is apparent, is also proposed. This item is scheduled for a public hearing tonight. The item has been properly noticed and advertised. The department has received no comments. Kevin Buckheit of Krieg DeVault is present this evening to give a brief presentation, after which he will be available for questions. In addition, if the APC is satisfied with the proposal, the petition may be voted upon to not require a workshop meeting and send a recommendation to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buckheit, welcome back. You picked a great night to come.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Kevin Buckheit, and I'm a planner with Krieg DeVault these days. This place is very familiar to me, except for this side of the podium at this point. Thank you for your time and your service for what you do, and I had a pretty detailed presentation made up, but I think if we can go with the PDF that I sent in, I'll just talk from the images that are on the screen. Lot 3 is owned by an entity that is owned by Ortho Indy, and the first phase of their construction is underway now, and that is the orthopedic clinic. Next to that, to the west and abutting that building, is going to be their orthopedic surgery center, and then detached from that building and a little bit farther west will be an office building. These changes that are proposed tonight and requested for positive consideration are necessary for the fruition of the total Ortho Indy project. If the setback, for instance, isn't modified, the surgery center that is shown there in the light gray or the light blue would have to be set back 120 feet. And that would make the functionality of the clinic and the surgery center nearly impossible, given the design of the interiors of both of those. Do I have control of this? There we go. For instance, from this doorway in the clinic to this doorway in the surgery center, there will be a covered walkway for the physicians to move seamlessly between the clinic and the surgery center for the service of their customers and the patients. That would be impossible with the setbacks as required. The setback language in the existing ordinance is awkward, to say the least, requiring that a minimum of 2 shall exceed a maximum setback. The idea there is to provide for a staggering of the building frontages along State Road 32 And that is happening actually naturally for a couple of reasons. One is all of the stormwater facilities are located along the south side of that PUD, and the north line along State Road 32 is not a straight line. So as it turns out, the three existing buildings do not align with each other, and our proposal is that no two side-by-side buildings would be able to align with each other. There would have to be the forced staggering. This, I think, is going to come off as a more organic approach to what was desired in the building staggering as opposed to what the current ordinance requires, which I propose would offer a gap tooth look in that part of the frontage along State Road 32. The landscaping has come about because of concerns with, if you scroll up just slightly on that drawing. Yeah, there we go. All those squares and the lines right there represent underground stormwater detention facilities. The pond there to the left is another feature, and then both the tire supply on the west and the paint store on the east also have their stormwater along 175th Street. The other factor that is just now coming to light is that we're not quite sure exactly where the service lines are going to come in from 175th Street to the facilities there. If, for example, they were to come up, proposed to come up the east side of that access drive from, up this side of the access drive from 175th Street, the landscaping plan currently shows a number of trees in there that would have to be relocated elsewhere on the site. Shrubs are okay on top of utilities and stormwater facilities, but trees are not because of the root depth that they present. I could go on, but I think I'm going to leave it at that with one other caveat, and I haven't done that either. I'm going to hand you proposed findings of fact for your consideration. Okay, my apologies to Mr. Smits. We had a graphic that would have allowed him to see these proposed findings of fact as well, but technology has not always been my friend. So rather than reading these proposed findings of fact to you, I would ask that they be admitted into the record as if I had read them verbatim. The public hearing notice that went out garnered one phone call with a real short discussion, and the gentleman didn't have concerns over what was being proposed. That being said, I'll stand down for questions that you may have and request your positive consideration and a positive recommendation to City Council.
Thank you. This item does require a public hearing, which I'm assuming we have no cards or anybody signed up yet. And no emails yet, but I will open a public hearing at 8:23. So if there is anybody attending virtually, please type quickly to at least tell us you have a comment and get it emailed in, because I will close the public hearing at 8:25. No emails. It is now 8:25 and the public hearing is closed. Are there any Questions from plan commissioners for staff or the petitioner?
A couple comments. I have to admit that when I read all the materials for this item, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And the reason for that is that and I'm gonna steal some language here from, what am I looking at? The narrative. The practical, cohesive, and aesthetic development of Ortho Indy's trio of buildings had to have been known, anticipated, and planned as this was going on, which means, in a way, we're at the juncture where, hey, we knew this was a problem, we planned it anyway, we built part of it, and now we gotta fix the rest of it. Now, an architect would have to know, I don't know if the same architect did all this or not, they would have had to know what they were doing, or end up with a gas meter inside a building, you know, when you're building consecutive buildings like this. That's what really rubbed me wrong. Having said that, I'm actually okay with the end result of this. I agree that the ordinance language was, I can't remember what you termed it, but it was challenging at best. It was more than awkward, and I think this does fix that, so I'm okay with the result, but I had to say that it really rubbed me wrong to kind of go this far through the process knowing all this, and then say, oh, by the way, now we kind of have to change this to make it work. So.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Dave Schmitz, feel free to weigh in.
Thanks, Bob. No, I appreciate the changes that are being made. That if anything, they probably improve the ordinance from before anyway. So that's all I've got. Thanks.
I have just a few questions.
Please.
The language about the landscaping and how it can be changed, or basically if stuff gets in the way and we don't have to have it, as long as no one in the department says so. That's kind of how I felt like it read. Can you explain that more to me, why you think you might not be able to meet the landscape standard?
As I mentioned, there are utility infrastructure and service lines and easements that we can't plant in or on, at least not the trees. The landscaping is, I'm sorry, the parking areas are pretty significant on the rest of the site. The site's kind of tight to begin with, I believe. And I really think that this ordinance and the one to the west, Spring Mill Point PUD ordinance, were written by the same author. And the Austrian Pine PUD was approved about 3 months prior to the Spring Mill Point PUD. That ordinance included the language that's similar to what we're proposing here. And I feel almost certain, knowing how the process works generally, and then here in Westfield, the considered thought that is given to progress as development happens. If it had been turned around and the Spring Mill Point PUD had been approved first with that language, it would have been incorporated into this PUD as well. And it's simply a way to acknowledge that landscaping is good first. Too much landscaping planted against best practices doesn't serve anyone well, especially over time, because the plants will be stunted if they survive. So trying to find a way to address the challenge of landscaping, if it happens, in a way that provides sufficient review from the city's perspective to allow the project to continue its construction.
Sure, and just put it in the record there, you know, even when we can't accomplish certain things because of the ground and easements and things, you know, creative planters and hardscape could be so welcome in those cases specifically.
And that could be part of the discussion.
But one thing, I know this, I was reading back through this original PUD and it mentions this pocket park. Was that ever built?
Which PUD?
The Austrian Pine?
It's actually a part of Ortho Indy Phase 1. They are building it.
Oh, they are building it, okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing something now that was going to require yet another time to come back.
It was shown on the DDP for Phase 1 of Ortho Indy.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments, questions? So as indicated at the beginning, in the absence of public comment that might have raised an issue, we can go ahead and not require a workshop meeting and send a recommendation to city council. So, is there anybody who would like to propose a motion regarding sending this to city council?
Just a quick clarification, since this is a new process. Do we need to make a separate motion to not have the workshop, or is the one motion to continue on good?
Separate for legal.
That's what I assumed. So I'll make a motion to not require a workshop meeting for 2209-PUD-18 Austrian Pine PUD Amendment 1.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second from Victor McCarty and Andre Maui to waive the requirement for a workshop meeting. Will staff please call the roll on that?
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Now we're ready for the recommendation to city council.
I'll make a motion to send a positive recommendation for 2209 PUD 18 to the city council.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion from Matt Deck, seconded by Kristen Berkman. Will staff please call the roll on the recommendation?
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljaric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will this be on the next town, city council? Okay. 12? Thank you very much.
We also have a second public hearing on 2209-COA-03, Unified Development Ordinance Amendment regarding floodplains. Staff presentation, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening, we have an amendment to the floodplain administrator and floodplain overlay district articles of the Unified Development Ordinance. As described in the staff report, this ordinance would replace both of these chapters in their entirities to match DNR's new model floodplain ordinance. Some of the more specific changes are outlined in the staff report. This item was properly noticed and advertised for a public hearing tonight, and we have received no comments. We are working with DNR on a few additional changes that they will need to sign off on prior to approval. Therefore, we anticipate bringing this back for recommendation at your October 3rd meeting. I am available if you have any questions following the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. I will open a public hearing at 8:33. And we'll wait for just a little bit to see if we have any virtual attendees who are interested in commenting. If there is anybody out there attending virtually, please quickly type us a note to planners@westfield.in.gov. In the absence of any emails, it is now 8:35, and I will close the public hearing. Are there any questions from commission for or anyone on staff, this is a state-driven thing, and we will not be doing anything this evening, as Pam has indicated, pending response from the state on some of the things the community development has presented to them.
Who would the floodplain administrator be in our current city staff?
It is formally Kevin Todd, though informally myself, I would say. So it allows for the director or his designee to be the floodplain administrator.
I noticed some interesting things that this person could have to do in terms of these permits, and then, like, making on-site inspections, and doing, like, working with insurance companies, and just a whole lot of things that seem onerous, and like you would almost need special training to be able to do some of these things that are mentioned in here. Is that the case?
So we do work with other departments. So a lot of these items, when you're mentioning the inspections, as far as for a new building, everything that needs to be done is outlined by FEMA, and proof being provided through elevation certificates and plans that are presented. In the case where you're talking about probably substantial damage determinations, that's something that in communities that have these events that happen, they honestly have all hands on deck. And I mean, if there's a major flood along the Ohio River, that community will have everyone who works for the city out doing these inspections per FEMA's kind of standard form. When it comes to things that are more engineering based, as far as land development, we do rely heavily on the surveyor's office and our public works department, our engineer and director over there, for guidance in that. And honestly, it's something we struggled with, and how to accommodate that, because there's really two major steps in floodplain development. There's the earthwork portion where people are grading the land and adding ponds and things like that, which really is more the expertise of engineering staff. But then we have the things that come with building permits. If you're improving a building that's in the floodplain, that the engineering department typically would not see, and that is why this kind of falls in our department. Honestly, it's something we've struggled with, and we've tried to figure out if and how we can change that, and if we can get a different floodplain administrator in the future, have it be in a different department or someone who's more cross-trained. I think we would be heavily in favor of that. It's just a matter of who that person would be and what their background would need to be for them to really be able to do both ends of that position.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, verifying upstream drainage areas and then going and dealing with these insurance adjusters and blah, blah, blah. It was like, this is not a one-person job, it seems. It seems like it would have to be multi-department, but yet there's one floodplain administrator.
Yeah, and some of these things are done through portals, through the DNR and all of that. And DNR also, they provide us with a lot of assistance and guidance. I mean, we call them all the time with questions about floodplain just to make sure we're doing everything properly. But some of these drainage areas and how large they are, all of that is available online. I mean, that's studies that have been done through the USGS where you can find that information. All of these floodplain studies are available online. We have them in our department as well, in our GIS. But like I said, we do rely heavily on other agencies and other city departments in our processing of these items.
Thank you.
Are you concerned she might need a raise? Or more training? Just kidding. All right, that completes our agenda items. Skip all the way down towards the bottom. Administratively dismissed, if you hadn't noticed, is the South Park Industrial 2112-ODP-26. So that is no longer an agenda item, which takes us to reports and comments. Anything for the good of the whole from Plan Commission members? Dave Schmitz, weigh in if you have anything.
I have something.
None for me.
Please proceed.
I didn't want to overstep Dave Schmitz, but you didn't have anything, right, Dave?
He did not.
Okay.
No, I do not. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say in general, I've been on the APC for a year and a half. And I've learned a lot from my fellow commissioners. Your experience runs circles around me. And I have seen several instances where our diligence has really proved wonderfully for petitioners and refining projects and getting things just right so that this wonderful community is getting what they absolutely deserve. There has to be a balance, though, when it comes to our T crossing and our I dotting, when we have a petitioner in front of us who is literally on her last leg with regards to this entire process. And if it's come down to things that we feel fairly confident can get done before it reaches council, and those things are some trees here, have an architecture question here, and just want to make sure the fence is stuff that practically is going to get done. And if they don't, it's not going to completely undercut the project. And to see what happened tonight with IBeach, in the fact that she left here and literally said, not on record, but that she was strongly considering going to another community. Was our I dotting and T crossing worth it tonight? And one of two things is going to happen. Either she's going to stay patient, which we all pray for. I think that would be the best decision. Or is she going to get so frustrated that she goes to Fishers or Noblesville? And it all being over some trees and a little bit of design here and there. Ultimately, is that worth it? Especially considering the state of Westfield and what we have from a business standpoint in the pipeline. So, again, I am serious when I compliment all of you. Your experience is tremendous, and you really have enhanced a multitude of projects. But there has to be a balance in how much we beat up a petitioner that's going to add a great deal of value to our city. That's my statement.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments before we move on?
I would like to say, we gave pretty darn clear instructions to the petitioner. I'm not saying on 100% of what was discussed tonight. But when those things weren't addressed, or we never saw anything until tonight, yeah, I'm gonna wanna hold that. And it's years of seeing what happens if we don't, and the outcome of that, it's forever. That's a zoning change you're making forever for that piece of property. So it's not that I like to do that, it's not that I want to do it, I certainly didn't, but I feel like we did not receive back what we requested at the last meeting. So I agree with you to an extent. I don't agree with you on some others, but I just wanted to say that.
To a point, though, there's a difference between approving blanket PUDs, which has been a problem in the past, and berating a local business owner who doesn't have the manpower, doesn't have the money, as all these high-up corporations, whomever you want to call them. You saw the defeat on her face tonight, and that is what impacts me. Because to Noblesville, they have $2 billion in the pipeline. Zionsville, brand new racing headquarters. Fishers, brand new racing headquarters. Carmel, we all know how they are. We have nothing in the pipeline. Nothing. So at what cost are we wasting Westfield's potential, wasting Westfield's future? I am right there with you of wanting the best of the very best, and it hurts. But sometimes we have to know the limit of, hit them hard, hit them hard, hit them hard. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, we hit too much, they're gonna go elsewhere. It just really hurts that, and again, like Matt said, I respect everyone up here. I appreciate you so much. You've been a great deal of mentors to me. But when we are hurting our community by not allowing the entrepreneurs, the small business owners to proceed and constantly force them to spend more money, whether it be to improve this, improve that, or just on legal counsel alone, that's what eats up costs. I think that's where petitioners are frustrated with, because it's just throwing the money in the trash can, and because it's a cost that they have to expend. it's just very frustrating, and my only call to action is we need to be better. That is it. We need to be better. Cindy, I appreciate you mentioning the trash cans tonight, because we obviously all missed that, and shame on us. I won't speak for everyone. Shame on me for not seeing that. But at the same time, we need to know when enough is enough, and we can move Westfield forward.
Would you like your council report, or?
Well, we were going to go on to downtown update. I was just going to let that percolate for a minute, see if there's anything further, but let's hear the downtown update.
Did everyone receive my email about a week ago, kind of going over where we are in the project? Did anyone have any questions? I guess I'll start there with that update at all. So we had, just for the public, we had a meeting where we really outlined for MKSK a lot of the deliverables and direction. And so this week, the team is regathering, and we will be starting to evaluate lighting, the patterns on the sidewalks. So if anybody feels strongly about coloring of pavers and the design of that, and benches. So those are going to be our first three big items to start trying to outline along there. We have, you probably saw in the write-up, we're going to somewhat focus on the middle section of State Road 32. There's not as much development on the ends, and so while they will receive trees and the pavers and all those different things, maybe not quite as many benches. So we are trying to keep the budget in mind as well along that corridor. I'm excited to have all of you to another workshop meeting where we have some of these designs ready to present, which should be hopefully early October-ish for that particular workshop. Any questions on that? Comments, input? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. City Council Liaison.
Let's see, council met August 22nd. Diana Payton gave an update on the historic Barker Cabin reconstruction, and they are having supply chain issues, but are getting it done. They have faced some rising costs, like, as we know, everything else in society has, and so they are running a bit short and looking for help in the community in terms of donations or the consideration of purchasing a brick, one of their custom bricks. That would really help them a lot. Our very own Caleb Ernest gave a fantastic presentation about non-residential stock, and it was a part 1 of 2, I'm to understand. The second one's coming. I would encourage everyone to watch it. It was really great. And so in general, there's 2,820 acres of non-residential zone land that's been platted into lots. 1,112 acres has been platted into blocks. 19% of non-residential zone land has not been platted. And then we have 4,865 acres of non-residential land. 2,393 acres have approved detailed development plans, and 427 acres don't have approved DDPs. So we have 1,112 acres, or 61 blocks, that have been platted. 933 acres have not been platted. So a lot of numbers, but it's a lot of things to consider, and I would encourage everybody to watch it. It's a nice little education. We also discussed some information from the mid-year budget review. And North Point 2, PUD was up for consideration after our negative recommendation. The petitioner provided council some information at the last minute that there is a letter of interest from a manufacturing facility that would like to perhaps acquire most, if not all, of the acreage, and wanted that to be considered. The information is not public on that letter of interest, and some of the councilors agreed to table the matter pending further information they could get about it. So that has not been voted on yet. It still shows up, I think, on the council agenda for Monday, so I don't think anything's changed there. We held a public hearing for the stormwater utility rate increase. We had a resolution and ordinance concerning our potential membership in the Central Indiana Regional Development Authority. And let's see, a resolution concerning the $6 million Grand Park debt repayment that was introduced. And happy to say, we should have that loan repaid to the Infrastructure Improvement Fund by the end of 2023. Council will be looking to pass that this coming Monday, just so you know. We also had a special budget session on August 31st. We had all the department heads there advertising what they wanted for next year, so that's also helpful to watch if you're at all interested. That's it.
Thank you. There was no BZA meeting in between our last meeting and now. So it takes us on to Community Development Department.
Yeah, just a couple quick things. One I alluded to earlier, the workshop meeting scheduled for the 19th of September. Outside of any PUD items that come back for that session, we would like to start talking about those questions that the mayor asked us to consider earlier this year, and just quick kind of refresher what those are, and I'll probably paraphrase and maybe butcher this, and I'll get the proper wording before the 19th. But one, really, how big do we want to be as a community? And I think that's really more kind of a focus on growth, at like physical geographic limit of growth at this point in time. Are we happy with the current comp plan recommendation for our growth limitations? Second one is infill development. How do we do that well? And third is how do we really do all of this in a sustainable manner for our 20, 30-year future? So start thinking about that. We'll dive into that a little bit more as a group in a couple weeks. And then the second item is Plat Committee. So we approved the rules this evening for the Plat Committee. We really need to start thinking about populating that group now. We don't expect to really have our first Plat Committee meeting until the end of October at the earliest, so we have a little bit of time, but only so many meetings between now and then to fill those positions. So with that, any questions on that, we can talk through that, maybe even again on the 19th if we need to, but that's it for me.
On that real quick, just what again is going to be the official time in day for the meeting?
It's the second and fourth Monday of the month at 11 a.m.
Kevin, may I also ask, when I had my meeting with the mayor, one thing that he talked about was, and maybe he's talked with others too, and since Matt and Victor have kind of talked about this tonight, was the process of the developers and how they come in and maybe communicating better to them some expectations up front of what we want as a community as far as types of businesses, placement of businesses. Is that something on your radar as well for these workshop meetings? Or
I suspect some of those questions will get into that topic.
okay,
I think they'll kind of naturally go there.
okay.
But yeah, no, not specifically, but because I hadn't heard those questions, so
It was
that's
just
new
kind
to
of a
me.
brainstorming as we had talked about some of these, different things that come in and kind of types of businesses that we'd really like to be attracting for the community, and I don't know how we can communicate that and moving forward and some things like that. So anyway, that would be nice, I guess, to have that as part of these workshops as well. I know I've already said it, I don't want to be repetitive, but unfortunately on this IBeach, I feel like that process they came in talking about a roof the first couple of times, and now it kind of got more detailed near the end, and I don't know if they could have consolidated that a little bit and it wouldn't feel like they came so many times, but I know that was something they wanted, and you all have managed that in the best way you could. So I don't know how we improve on that in the future, but maybe those are some things to talk about as well.
We're down to a motion to adjourn. Do we have one?
So moved.
We have motion from Cindy Spoljarek and seconded by Victor McCarty. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spoljarek?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes?
Mr. Maui? Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:55.
8:55, exactly.